My friends, if I woke up today and I lost all my guitar skills, there's one very important thing I'd work on immediately that 99% of players never work on, and it's getting all that nasty, unwanted string noise under control. Because it doesn't matter how fast you can play, if you always have unwanted noise coming from the strings, especially when you're playing with distortion, you will sound like a beginner player forever. Most players don't actively practice this in their routines, so today I want to show you some very important tips and tricks when it comes to this, so let's dive into this right away. So for those of you that don't know, a fret wrap is essentially just a string dampener that you position on your fretboard like this, usually in that kind of area. If you don't have a fret wrap at home, you can just place one of your fingers right here, maybe not the middle finger, that looks kind of offensive. So when I place my index finger right here, not on the first fret, actually fretting the note, just right here, and I play all the strings like this, you can hear that I'm dampening the strings compared to having them ring out like this. So when I put on my fret wrap right here, I get the exact same result. Now listen to what happens when I'm playing a scale. So this thing right here simply helps a bit with reducing string noise. And in a lot of my old videos, when I started out on YouTube, you can see me clearly using one. Of course, this is a great tool when you're in the studio and you have to record clean takes quickly, because time is money when you're in the studio, right? But I personally would not recommend using one of these when you're practicing. Reason number one for that is you won't be using those that much in a practical context, because when you're playing live on stage, you would have to use it for your guitar solo, so place it right here. But then when you play rhythm guitar, you would have to slide it back like this every single time, so that the open strings are actually ringing out, because as you know, when you have it in muting position, your strings will not ring out, so it's not very practical to always go like this for the riffs and then like this for the guitar solos and then back there. And the second reason why I don't recommend using it too much while you're practicing is because you're obviously not gonna hear what's causing the string muting issues. I think relying on this one too much set me back quite a couple of months or even years when it comes to cleaning up my technique. Use them with caution. So as I briefly mentioned, string muting definitely involves both hands, so this is not just a thing that only concerns the fretting hand or the picking hand. The first thing you want to be sure of when it comes to your fretting hand, let's start with this one, is that you're only really pressing down on the strings that you want to play on. In case you haven't developed good finger control and finger independence, especially with fast and fluid legato lines, you might accidentally not only touch other strings while you're playing, you might even fret the notes a little bit. I will try to demonstrate that a little bit now, thinking back to how I did it when I started out with legato. I think that's a good example of how it sounded like. You could see that the movements with this demonstration were a lot bigger and more erratic, and that's one of the worst bad habits when it comes to string noise, just working with movements that are uncontrolled and way too big so that you're constantly touching all the other strings except the one that you're actually playing on. By the way, my friend, if you want to make 2025 your year when it comes to guitar progress, you will need to do a bit more than just watching YouTube videos. So to help you out with having the most effective practice routine of all time, I created 30-day practice packages for any kind of guitar technique in my online guitar academy on patreon.com/bernd. These courses come with a step-by-step practice plan that tell you exactly which exercises to practice for how long, and they will take your guitar technique from this to this in just 30 days of practicing. I've helped over 40,000 happy students with these courses so far, and now it's time to take your guitar technique to a world-class level in 2025. Let's do this together. Just click the link down below, sign up right now and get started right away. I'm waiting for you inside, but now let's continue with the video. So if you feel like most of the string noise, especially when you're playing with distortion, is caused by your fretting hand, I cannot recommend enough to go through all of the legato exercises that I posted on here, especially the 30-day legato course. With those exercises, you will learn how to control your fretting hand movements like this, so that they not only get smaller, but much more precise. And if you really focus on just playing on the exact string that you're playing on without touching all the other surrounding strings, or if you're touching them, actually muting them with your fretting hand, which is what we will talk about next, you will get much cleaner results already. So in case all of that was a little bit too advanced for you and you don't care about playing fast legato lines that much, one basic muting motion you should definitely know is simply touching your strings with your fretting hand. Super basic example after playing power chords. So with these power chords I wasn't muting with my picking hand at all. I was lightly touching all the strings after I was finished with my power chord, and that really helps with getting rid of strings that are just ringing out, that you want to avoid, of course. This is relatively easy to learn and you won't have to think about it too much once you start doing it. The only thing to keep in mind, of course, is that you have a lot of natural harmonics across the neck, most commonly used on the 5th, 7th or 12th frets. So as you could see with this B power chord, when I was muting only with my fretting hand, I made sure to mute around the 6th fret because that one is not ringing out like this when you're touching the fretboard, but even that becomes automated after a while. A good way of practicing this is just with the E power chord, because you will need this quite a lot. But it's not my personal favorite way of string muting, because often you can actually hear the sound when your fingers hit the fretboard like this, and I personally prefer a sound like this. So I'm not using a noise gate for the sake of this demonstration, but you could not hear any notes or any harmonics ringing out in between those power chords. And the reason for this is that I'm using a mix of my fretting hand muting and my picking hand muting. So the picking hand muting will be very familiar to you if you played a couple of metal riffs already. It's essentially the same as just moving your palm on the strings for palm muting. But instead of just muting the strings and then playing, I'm just sliding my hand forward, or I'm putting my hand on the strings like this with the intention of just stopping the note or stopping the strings from ringing out. And as you heard, when I'm doing this with both my fretting hand and my picking hand at the same time, I really have dead silence in between my chords, and pop, rock, metal, blues, audio engineers of any genre or producers of any genre when you're in the studio will love you for doing this. This is one of the super subtle details that separates the really professional guitar players from the intermediates, and even I have to admit it's much more important than being able to shred at 350 beats per minute. Getting the muting aspect of basic riffs like this right is much harder than it sounds, and if you give it a try right now and you realize, oops, I didn't really work on that so far, please do it, you won't regret it. Aside from string muting, like we discussed it with both hands now, one exercise that really helped me with reducing string noise in general is something very practical that I need constantly for this pop gig that I'm doing. It's switching between chords without the listener actually hearing that you have to reposition your fingers and do all of that crazy stuff. That's also much harder than it looks. So if you struggle with string noise, especially when you're playing riffs or switching between chords, try to find fingers that can actually remain on the fretboard as you're switching. A lot of beginners make the mistake of taking all the fingers off the fretboard and then completely repositioning them for every single chord. That will result in a lot of string noise. When you just lift all of your fingers like this. In a lot of cases you just have to reposition a couple of fingers, especially with those basic campfire chords. And if you actually have to lift your fingers, also when you're playing solos, make sure to avoid that kind of unwanted pull-off motion that I also talked about quite a lot. So when I have to lift my finger for single notes, for example, I make sure not to lift it like this or to pull down the string. I use my other fingers to mute, or I help out with my picking hand, and I also make sure to gently lift my finger and not like that. One advanced fretting hand muting technique that I discussed previously is using your index finger to mute the strings. So when I'm playing a scale position like this, the index finger sticks out a little bit more like that, so that it slightly touches the lower string. As you could hear, it was pretty muted. You can hear a slight harmonic coming out, but compared to that, it's much better. So this is something I'm definitely doing subconsciously, and you can find out more about it in the lesson I already made about this topic. I linked it in this post. This is something that just happened organically from practicing a lot, and I think my fingers often adjust to what I'm hearing. So I can't give you any practice tips when it comes to that or exercises. Still, the only thing I really recommend is working on legato when it comes to all of those finger technique and muting and finger independence issues. You definitely want to avoid grazing the strings with your fingers or knuckles. I can't mention that often enough because this really held me back with my own technique. My fingers were rubbing against the strings like this, often even bleeding. So I really focus on lifting them like this so they are not touching the strings in any way. And that has really cleaned up my playing. And of course I also focus on not really touching the strings with my thumb, like you usually would when you're playing pinch harmonics like this. So although I'm only working with the tip of my pick, I really want to make sure that just the pick comes in contact with the strings. And since I started focusing on that combined with working a lot on my legato and finger technique, I basically got rid of the fretwork completely. I only use it occasionally for tapping stuff, and maybe if I have to record something very fast and get a super clean take in a couple of minutes. And I think what will help you the most right now is just being really mindful when you're practicing and paying attention to where the source of the string noise actually is. Is it that unwanted pull-off motion? Are you sometimes fretting strings that you don't even want to play on? Or is it the picking hand where your fingers are rubbing against the strings, or you're touching the strings with your thumb and not just with your pick? So in terms of exercises, please check out the legato course in case you didn't complete it yet. And if you feel like even with all of this input from this video, you still struggle with string noise and with string muting, make sure to post videos of your playing in the VIP Facebook group. Over there I'm giving helpful feedback to student practice videos, and we have a super positive and really helpful guitar community over there. But I hope I could help you with this quick video. I will work on the next one from your wishlist very soon. Until then, have an awesome weekend. See you soon. Bye bye.